Hey everyone, Jason Weckerle here. Today in this video, I'm going to teach you guys how to tie a jig, a Marabou jig, for trout and salmon fishing here on the Great Lakes. Personally, I live in southeastern Wisconsin, so the lake I fish the most is Lake Michigan. But this jig will work on any of the Great Lakes where the salmon and trout run up the rivers to spawn. I'd say about 20 years ago, I was noticing fly fishermen out on the rivers here in southeastern Wisconsin throwing a fly called the egg-sucking leech. And the first thing that popped into my mind was that it just looked like a woolly bugger fly with a jig head on the front of it. The little tiny yarn fly that they have in front of the egg-sucking leech, it's supposed to look like a leech sucking onto like a trout or a salmon egg. I've caught probably thousands of fish now on these jigs, and I thought I'd show you guys how to tie these things so you guys can use them too, make them yourself. These things can mimic stone flies, leeches. If you tie them in like brighter colors like white or black and white, you can mimic bait fish like smelt, alewives, shiners, whatever. I've caught everything from steelhead, brown trout, cohos, king salmon, smallmouth bass, everything on these jigs. And from the time the cohos start running in mid to late fall, all the way through winter into spring, this jig will help you catch fish as long as you got open water in front of you on the rivers, even in the harbors, the marinas. This is a really hot jig to use, so you guys are going to want to learn this if you don't know this already. So let me get started now and show you how to tie this jig. All right, to get started, first we'll talk color. My favorite color of all for this pattern is black. Whether it's black with a chartreuse green or a hot pink or an orange or a purple jig head, it doesn't matter. Which the jig head color plays a huge difference some days. Some days they want the chartreuse green jig, sometimes they want the hot pink. Plain black or any black with a mixture of this peacock chenille is just absolutely awesome. This peacock chenille's got some green, gold, kind of a nice shiny look to it, and I love using that. But just black, I absolutely love. But I also love to use like pink and white, olive green. You can see all the different colors I have in here. But as you can see, black is the main color I like to carry. And when I'm fishing for Great Lakes salmon and trout, I like to bring 1/32 and 1/16 ounce. I tend to use the 1/16 for just casting and working the jig in without a bobber, or if there's any time where I'm fishing heavier current with a bobber. But the 1/32 ounce, I like drifting it under a bobber. Like that's my main jig size I like to use almost all the time. But if the water is crystal clear and really low, you can also get away with casting it and jigging it too, just keeping it right above the bottom. And I've had some really hard strikes and vicious strikes from coho salmon, steelhead, brown trout on these jigs, casting them and working them back in. But I mainly just use a bobber, like a little foam bobber, and I got little woolly bugger jig right there, and just let it drift in the current with a couple wax worms on the hook or a piece of shrimp meat. The color I'm going to tie today has peacock, black peacock chenille, black hackle feathers for the legs, and black marabou for the tail. Make sure when you guys buy jigs for trout and salmon, you buy strong enough jig heads. This one is actually called a steelhead and salmon jig. I don't know what company made this. I bought these online a long time ago at a fly fishing website, and I painted they were just plain lead jigs. I painted them all with jig head paint, and I covered the paint with Sally's Hard as Nails. Let me grab that real quick. All right, I was saying I painted the jig heads with jig head paint, and I covered them with Sally's Hard as Nails. You can buy this at the nail polish section, the makeup section at your wife's makeup shop, or at Walmart in the makeup section, wherever you can find it. But Sally's Hard as Nails, I put this stuff when I finish my flies and my jigs. I put it on the thread so it hardens and seals the thread tight. But I also put this on my lure paint and my jig paint, and it turns that paint, like it says, hard as nails. But make sure the jig head has a strong enough hook and it's sharp enough, because trout and salmon will bend out a standard 1/32, 1/16 ounce panfish jig like it's nothing. But I've tied these jigs all the way down to 1/64 ounce, and I've done very well out on the inland ponds, the inland streams of Wisconsin for wild trout, stocked trout, and I've also used the 1/32 ounce for those fish as well. But there's something about a tiny woolly bugger jig when you're fishing the inland streams that the brook trout, rainbow trout, they just go nuts for. But since we're talking Great Lakes trout, we're tying the larger size, 1/16, 1/32 ounce size. So let's get started. Make sure you got black thread, black or peacock green, greenish black, chenille, black hackle feathers, and black marabou. All right, to get started, just put your jig in the fly tying vise, and you're gonna take your thread and start out by wrapping it around the shank of the hook, just back and forth. I like to start towards the back with my thread, since that's the first process you're gonna do is tie on the marabou tail. Take a little bit of marabou, and then you're just gonna cut about, I'd say about 1.5 inches to tie right on the back of your jig, just like so. And you don't have to make them too poofy or too large. You just want to make these jigs about 2 to 2.5 inches long, no bigger than 2.5 inches. You start with that tail in the back. If you guys are familiar with the woolly bugger fly pattern, this is the exact same pattern, just tied on a jig head. Like I said, the egg sucking leech has that pattern has kind of a little egg ball in the front of it, like a yarn ball, and that's where I started getting the idea for this jig pattern from. But you got your tail tied on, then you're gonna take about 6 inches of the chenille, cut a piece off, and you can run wild with ideas for different patterns. You can use different colored chenille, different colored jig heads, different color hackle feathers, different color hair. I mean, you can see like right here, I got kind of like a pink and white with pink thread, or I got a chartreuse in white with chartreuse green thread. I mean, you can tie up just about anything you want, any color pattern, but I'm just showing you guys what I like to use. Then you're gonna take the chenille. I like to start from the back and work my way forward with it. Some guys like to start forward and work their way back, but just tie it on there right at the tip so it's secure. And then you wrap it around the shank of the hook. Just like so. And then thread. I like to thread kind of sideways. And you can see that peacock chenille's kind of got longer fibers on it. It's kind of giving it a buggy look already. But I kind of wiggle my thread back and forth and secure that chenille. And then I have it on the front of the jig now. I give it some wraps, because this is going to be the final process. And this is a very easy jig to tie. In fact, if you learn the woolly bugger fly pattern as a fly tyer, you basically learn the basics of almost all fly patterns, because it teaches you how to work with feather, like hackle feathers, all different materials, how to build a fly. And last but not least, I'm gonna take just one single hackle feather, and I like to strip some of the fibers off, just like this. So you just have a little stick, chop some of it off, and I tape that, secure it down, just like so. And then you're gonna tape this. This is the tricky part. Without breaking it, you're gonna wrap this, just going back. All the blades are gonna start sticking out right away. I like to take my thread, just like you saw me wiggling it, it kind of separates the fibers. Keep working it back towards the tail, just like so. And that's what gives it that buggy look. And if you want to, you can trim the blades down shorter. These are really long blades on this one. This is a big feather. But they don't have to be perfect at all. You don't even have to add the legs, actually. The fly, or the jig without the legs, will also work just with the body on it, but the legs give it that buggy creature look. Like I said, these mimic leeches, stoneflies, all the stuff trout and salmon eat in the rivers. And by no means is this my best work whatsoever, but I'm not an expert fly tyer by any means, but I've caught a lot of fish on the flies and jigs I've made. So then right in the end, you just kind of do a whip finish, which I kind of do like an overhand loop swoop pull type, just to secure the thread onto the hook, which most fly fishermen know how to use. The little whip finish tool, I have not learned to use that thing yet. I own one, but when I see guys use that thing, I'm just kind of like, what the hell are they doing? I'm gonna have to learn. I'm not an expert fly tyer, but like I said, I've caught a lot of fish on the flies I have made. So, and I made streamer flies for walleyes and white bass fishing, all the way up to bass and pike. I make these woolly bugger flies, but then I'm just gonna trim off any excess material. Trim the blades down a little bit. Like I said, by no means is this my best work or anything like that, but I wanted to show you guys what I do to make these jigs, and I had a few of you asking me to make this video, so I thought, hey, now's the best time. Trout season's up on us, the ice is melting. It's time to get out there and start throwing these jigs. So there we go. Then I take that Sally's Hard as Nails, just put a little drop of it right on the thread behind the jig head. And that right there is how you make the woolly bugger jig. You can see right there, that's a pink jig head with black and that green black chenille, but that is an awesome pattern right there. And like I said, you guys could run wild with ideas, make your own patterns. You might stumble across something that is really hot and works really well for you. And I mean, get yourself a little fly box, perfect little box to put your jigs, and they're all falling out, but yeah, perfect little box to put your jigs. Like I said, this is a really simple pattern. Just look up how to tie a woolly butterfly, tie it to a jig head, and you got yourself a woolly butter jig, or an egg-sucking leech jig, whatever you want to call this. If you guys like this video, subscribe to my page, hit the like button. I'll be putting out more fishing videos, more fishing tutorials, some cooking videos that have to do with fish recipes, stuff like that. Hopefully this information helps you, and if it works for me, it should work for you. Good luck fishing this season. Take care.